What's up, guys? Welcome back to the NextGen Sales Leader Podcast. I have Tyler Mounce here, who is the founder of Amplis, which is a lead generation company based out of Orange County, California. Welcome to the show, Tyler.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be here, man.
So let's jump into it. So how did you get into lead generation? Tell me about where you guys are in your stage of business, and we can jump into really anything we want to talk about here. I'm sure lead generation will be a hot topic.
Yeah, fair enough. I got into lead generation. So the real quick version is I was originally going to go to grad school. My dad's an academic. I was going to follow in his footsteps. Got into personal training as what I thought was going to be a way to pay my way through grad school. Started doing that during undergrad. And then after graduating, I was decided to just work for a little while. I wasn't anxious I didn't have like the linear path. I was like stopped a couple of times, transferred, I was like, I'm going to wait. And then I was doing that for a year, really enjoying what I was doing. So I just decided to stay at that company. And as I grew, I got more opportunities to move into sales, business development, launched operations in a new market, and then eventually spent the last few years I was there as head of marketing. And kind of the jumping off point was as like a brand marketer for a small, like bootstrapped service business. I found like small service businesses just weren't served well by marketing agencies, right? We weren't big enough to have an in-house team. And so we needed agency partners and other marketing contractors. And I would always end up in a situation where I'd talk to a marketing company and they'd have a portfolio of, 20 or however many clients, and 80% of them would be e-com brands. And they'd be like, and we're just going to do this with you too. And it was like, nah, it's not the same thing. And so like lead generation for service businesses was always a little bit of a nuanced but important distinction. So when I started my company, I was like, well, I'm going to focus on that segment. Like they're not served well. It's hard because a lot of large agencies just cost prohibitive to work with. And so we focused on small to mid-sized service businesses that want to kind of scale profitably, specifically mostly bootstrapped companies. And then, and then we're pretty early on. We're about a year and a half into this, which is a fun and exciting time to be a new marketing company with everything that's going on. But that's kind of my just real quick background.
Yeah, it's a wild time to be a part of this whole thing. I mean, as you and I both know, we're in some of the same groups together at this point, and just like every day there's some new technology, some crazy crash of some technology that's supposed to be working. I'm not going to name names, but we all know it happened, or I shouldn't say people don't know, but we had a major email infrastructure provider go down, which basically blacklisted I'm sure thousands and thousands of inboxes and domains. And so for a cold email agency that relies on that to send emails, it was horrible. But have you followed that closely? I know we're kind of going back and forth on our group on that right now.
No, I haven't, but we had a similar thing. Like our sequencer had a glitch that we were getting all these replies. They were like, people were pissed. They're like, you shouldn't be sending me 7 emails in 6 minutes. And I'm like looking in the things. I'm like, we sent 1 email. I don't get it. And then they came back out and they're like, oh, hey, sorry. And they basically there was a glitch where they were like repeat sending a bunch of our emails to our prospects. We didn't even know about it. So it was funny, like same timing, but different software, unrelated. But yeah, it's funny because I left my last company in May of 23. And I'm like, okay, we know what's going on in the marketing world. And then we started in September 23. And I felt like I came back to like a new world, I was like, oh, this is like way different than it was 6 months ago when I, was doing it. So I'm with you on that. Like you almost need to particularly as like a business owner, you have to work so hard to free up time just for testing, iteration, service development. I mean, that's like the new thing. Like I feel like leaders in marketing companies have to be at the forefront of service development because you have to optimize for a new technology or a new LLM or a new model that comes out. And it's just the workload on the back end of that is pretty massive. So.
Yeah, I found the same problem with me is that typically with almost all of my companies, they've been more SaaS focused. Now for whatever reason, I had an agency when I first got started in 2014. And now, and before that, I was in nonprofits and stuff like that, politics. But then when I got into for-profits, it was agency and then SaaS. And then basically now I'm in the e-com somewhere in between. And then now I'm finally back into the agency world, still in the SaaS world, but the agency world. And it is interesting coming back and like seeing the playing field from the agency perspective, because it does, one, make me have to be sharper as a marketer, because I
Yeah.
have to respond to multiple value props and offers and markets. And what works in one market doesn't work in another. And I've learned that the hard way with my cold email agency, like, that there's some target audiences that just do not respond to cold email no matter how good you are. So I actually had a question for you. So when you say service-based businesses, do you have a specific set of types of businesses, or is it just any service-based business?
Nah, we're more horizontal positioning. So we work with like what I've found, or at least my take on it, is that small like service businesses of certain sizes, there's a lot of through lines in terms of the similarities. Like for example, like we have a financial consulting firm, and I feel like that's more similar to some like consumer service businesses in terms of a lead gen approach than like an enterprise level financial consulting firm. And so we just kind of like two things. When I came out of the last company, I'd been doing the same thing for 13 years. And so I was like excited about touching new projects, getting exposed to new business models, things like that. And so we like the variety that comes with that. But then also, yeah, it's just kind of like there's some similarities of companies of a certain size, because particularly like budgets don't range as much. And so you kind of deploying like certain resources in a certain ways. So our business is broken up into sort of two divisions, which is our consumer services and then our B2B services. My background, obviously, in health and fitness was consumer services. And then we kind of stumbled into the B2B side of things, honestly. Like it was kind of an interesting way that shifted. But like obviously my background is a lot on the paid media side. And then a lot of my team has experience in that world. So we do a lot on the paid media side for consumer services. And then I kind of like, it's kind of funny going back to like the thing of making you sharper and having to develop, quickly as a business was I think I don't remember when it was. It was probably early 2024. We were doing paid media actually for a B2B client. And then I was like, oh, we'll do some outbound for you. Like I just like offered to do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like right when the world changed. Right. And so it was an interesting time. It's both really challenging, because like one of the things you were talking about in a presentation, the thing you did yesterday, talking about like scaring people away from doing cold email is like, on the one hand, it's exciting because never has there been a better opportunity for new players to get into the game, right? Like if you had 20 years of cold email experience, it doesn't really give you, unless you just have the scale, within your agency to like invest in the growth and development. But a lot of it is like, I think you said old world versus new world, right? Like nothing applies anymore. And so in that part, it's really exciting because, like there's kind of been this like split. It's like, there's like this split in time where like this was all before. And like now anyone can get in, right? Like Clay is kind of changing the landscape, particularly for B2B outbound. And so it's like harder than ever, but also like the playing field's been like almost leveled for everybody. So it's a fun, exciting time. And yeah. So anyways, that's kind of like where we're at.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's funny because like I've reflected on that presentation yesterday. For anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, we launched our first called it the cold email machine course. So if you're listening to this on a podcast or on YouTube or something, we do offer a cold email machine course. Did not mean to plug that, but here we are. And we teach everyone how to do cold email. But what's interesting, and this is me being more like authentic and vulnerable about it, is that I am not a professional course salesman. That's not like my specialty. And so I would say that like in reflection of yesterday's presentation, what we did for anyone listening, and I think this does work for launches generally, is we drove a lot of people into a B2B community from my LinkedIn profile. So we actually had like kind of a crazy growth to around 1,200 people on the B2B community in 2 to 3 months. And then what we do is we will typically have something called like a clarity call where we sell them to a $1 course and then upsell them to a pro community course or community. And then there's a bunch of paid courses there. So the thing that I realized yesterday is, have you read the Perfect Webinar or the training by Russell Brunson on the Perfect Webinar?
No, I haven't.
So I went through the training years ago, and I just realized after I was done pitching, I was like, man, I just made the like cardinal sin of pitching, which is like I should have just done the Perfect Webinar, which is more about like breaking false beliefs, and it's less about tactical what do you do type stuff. But for me, like my biggest fear, and this gets back to the point you just made, which was like how like selling against cold email is like I I'm generally speaking pretty good at selling, usually high ticket enterprise level deals. And I've sold a lot of vaporware in my life, a lot of crappy products. And I'm at the point like where like that was like fine when I was 25 and I was just trying to like get my like feet wet. But now I just can't live with myself if I sell crap. I just can't do it. Uh, and so for me, it's like, when we're selling the course, it's like the course is amazing and it's perfect if you are the right type of person for this type of
Yeah, yeah,
offer.
yeah.
But it's like if you get into that course and you have like no clear messaging, or if you don't have a budget of $3,000, or you're in a tiny little niche vertical that doesn't have the TAM size required for cold email, well, you're going to get blasted and you're going to spend money on something you don't need. So for me, I was acutely aware of that while I was presenting. So anyways, it's just interesting that you said that, because I was feeling that as I was pitching, and I put that presentation together because one of the problems we have in our business, and I'm curious to find out if you have this problem in your business, is that everybody wants lead generation.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I actually have to say no to like 70% of the people that come in, because that we have a whole qualification checklist, even into the psychographics of just like, does the person have a long-term focus and are they just a relaxed human being?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if we get the wrong person into a lead generation done for you agency service, it can go really bad really quickly if they're not the right fit for the service, and also if they don't have the psychological profile to sustain, the ups and downs of lead generation, which it is ups and downs. So, curious, how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's just funny you said psychographics. And I was going to say the same thing. Like, it is a really interesting. One of the things that I thought I was really like thinking about after your presentation was like, kind of this idea of like TAM size, qualification, and then like the psychographics is really interesting because so where we're struggling is like, again, to use like everyone has their own terms and stuff like that. I think of like lead generation as like the creation of the opportunity. Sales is like you give the demo, you do the pitch, whatever, like, but then there's this gray space of lead nurture, which is
Mhm.
where a lot of people fall flat. And again, I'm working with a lot of times, like the person fielding leads from my efforts is the owner founder of a company, or they've got a small sales team or whatever, or he's trying to get his VA to like do appointment setting. And so we've looked at like adding in lead nurture or like appointment setting as a add-on to our service.
Mm.
Um, but the other thing too is like, because similar, like, we have a pretty diverse set of clients, again, spanning like, because on the consumer services, we lead with paid media. On the B2B services, we lead with like targeted programmatic outreach, a large portion going to LinkedIn actually now,
Mhm.
um, which is an interesting one. And we should probably talk about that. But and then obviously there's some overlap, right? Like consumer services, you can use LinkedIn programmatic outreach for building like referral and affiliate networks. And then obviously, and I'm actually pretty bullish on paid media on Meta platforms for B2B, because I think like a lot of CEOs like check Instagram on the weekend. And so you can like get, in front, especially with the value of brand recall, and Google's getting blasted right now, particularly with like services. Um, so yeah. So, anyways, like, but the thing is like, there's some cool things about it, but it's like, and they're wildly different, LinkedIn and email outbound, right? In terms of, but you have to kind of like gauge the person's ability to like leverage the opportunities you're generating. And it's funny because like LinkedIn has been great, and I'm with you. Like, I think LinkedIn's having a moment. We're doing a lot on LinkedIn. It's generally bringing a really high ROI for people. Um, and we want to stay in the game when it comes to email, because again, when the balances shift or whatever, like email's never going to go away. I think you
Mhm.
talked about that as well. So I think it's in our best interest to stay ahead of the curve on those changes. But like right now, LinkedIn's really interesting because it's almost like this return to old school sales,
Mhm.
right? Like I have to tell all my people, like, do not drop a link. Don't like, like people like will get a reply on LinkedIn. And they'll be like, hey, want to book a demo? And I'm like, no, dude, like slow it down. Like
Mm-hmm.
if someone, and so this is my, like, and this is my hot take is like, if someone will reply to you once on LinkedIn, they'll reply to you always on LinkedIn. And I'm like, go old school, ask clarifying questions, feel out pain points. And it's like this almost exercise in delayed gratification. It's like, it's like, if you think of like old school salespeople, it's like, it's kind of ideal, right? Like we can be like, oh, I can just ask all these clarifying questions. I can really qualify them. And then the other thing is everyone uses the term ICP, which I don't equate to company demographic profiles. Like there's psychographics involved in that. It's like we reach out to 100 companies on LinkedIn that fit your company profile. Not 100 of them are your ideal client because they don't share the values. They're not going to be, they're going to be difficult to work with. Maybe they're not willing to invest in the kind of services you provide and whatever. And so LinkedIn's amazing for that. But it is interesting because it's like, you have to get a unique type of person who's like enjoys that. Like, I think they call it social selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, that's good. Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's getting tough, and like we're investing. We had, again, we're a young company. We had some early churn with issues. We just didn't manage expectations very well.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like, hey, this is what's going to happen, and like the same thing with cold emails. Like people ask me, well, how long do you think it's going to take to get results, or how long should we see? How long should we take to see if this is working? And I'm like, well, are you scaling for an exit? Because if you are, it takes as long as it takes. Like we have, like, no one buys a company that doesn't have like scalable acquisition channels. Like, so we just grind it out. Like if it takes a year, it takes a year. Or, if you're like, if that's not you, it's like, you're just like, testing the waters of different things. It's like, that's a different conversation. But like, we've had to work really hard to manage expectations, qualify people based on kind of the softer things like their appetite for time investment and lead qualification and lead nurture and stuff like that. And, again, it's not like the days where you like, spin up an email campaign and you're going to have a 1% to 2% book to demo, drop a Calendly link and book demos like off of a cold email. Like it's different now.
Yeah, it's totally different. It's like, for anyone who's listening, and again, I know we're kind of referring to this presentation, but I probably spent like 20 minutes just setting expectations. Because there's so many little like subtle things that can throw you for a loop, specifically with cold email as a channel. And the reason LinkedIn is so interesting is that it's like all the technical challenges of cold email, like, which is actually, I think 90% of the problem, goes away. Now, you still have the copywriting component, but with LinkedIn, it's like, to your point, there's just so much more trust immediately once you get a connection request. If your profile is good, you have enough followers, you have some decent content, you look like a normal person, you have some a good resume, it's immediately, you're like 10 steps ahead of a cold email. And what I've found is like, I've kind of been straddling multiple sales cycles, both for our clients, but also for me personally, because I'm a fractional CRO for a company called Website Navigator. And so I lead their sales team. I have my own agency, as we know, NextGen Sales Systems. I now have this kind of informational product community, NextGen Sales Systems, but I'm also launching, as you know, a SaaS platform for cold email agency owners called reviops.com. And what I've found is that each sales cycle is completely different. So for example, like if I go into Website Navigator, cold email does not work at all. The TAM is probably about like 70,000 people. Realistically, like maybe like 10,000, no, I'd say like 7,000 companies total. And they're very divergent. So you might have something called a roustabout company or something called a coil tubing company. They all drive around the oil field, but they're very different types of businesses. And so for us, like we found that these guys, they're sometimes not in cell signal. Sometimes they are. Text messages works very well if you can get the cell phone number. But it's almost all cold calling. It's like we made 130,000 cold calls. And that was the only way we could get to them. Also events do quite well with them. But that's a completely different motion than, the agency services. The agency services almost are entirely through cold outbound. We actually do quite well with our own email offers. And so that fills our calendar and we're able to sell. Whereas like Reviops, it was literally like entirely through either niche channels like WhatsApp with small communities of these types of, cold email agency owners. But what I found was most effective, and I think, for any SaaS kind of startup founder person, what I would suggest uh, is get on Sales Navigator, come up with a list of your top 100 people. And what I found very, very, very effective was I put together the top 6 challenges of what we solved for. So I didn't really plug the product or the features or anything like that. It was more like problem 1, here's how we solve problem 1.
Yeah.
Problem 2. And all I would do is just send and say, hey, we're launching a beta program for this app, for this new central database platform to help solve your top 6 data management challenges. I'd love you to check out the top 6 challenges we have and see if there's a fit here. And that was the call to action. And I was getting like crazy, crazy, crazy conversion rates. And I actually only did probably, I don't know, 30 or 40 outreaches. And you can see the results. I have like about 18 people in the WhatsApp group, but I could have gone a lot further with it. I just want to make sure that before we go like large scale, that the product's good. But my point in saying this to everyone listening is that, it's there's no like perfect motion. Like everyone thinks there's like this like template that you just plug into businesses, and I just think you got to figure it out business by business. So I mean, how do you think about that?
Yeah. And I think that's why, because you asked about like our niche or our verticals, that like we don't target specific verticals because like nothing, having come from the brand marketer side, nothing is worse than a marketing agency making me feel like my company's like every other company. And so like, and again, you can have companies in the same industry, but they can be very, very different. And so, whether it's companies in a different industry, different vertical, or in the same one, like you have to feel it out. Cause again, like we have some clients that are in the software dev space, like the founders are developers, right? Like they are different cats. These guys are like, software engineers, and so again, business by business, CEO by CEO, right? Like, again, it comes down to the psychographics, the ideal profile, which again, if you can create channels where you can kind of like filter for those. And again, a lot of our stuff is high ticket, on the consumer side and on the B2B side. And so you're dealing with long sales cycles either way. So why does it matter if the length of time is post demo or pre demo? Right? Like you're dealing with long sales cycles, and you got to figure out kind of like, well, where are we strong at? I mean, we say we, meaning like the client's internal team for like their processes, whether you want to call it rev ops or marketing ops or whatever, like how they're handling and nurturing leads along in that process. And again, managing expectations and all those things becomes a huge piece of it. So, and we get, we could have 2 companies, and like the internal person that we're directly working with for managing these opportunities we generate, that could be a different role, right? And that's so different psychographics on the person inside. Like some of them are salespeople, like they're sharks. They're like stoked about these opportunities to engage people. Other people are like, I don't really want to do this. And so that's kind of why, again, maybe I'm naive in thinking that we could be industry agnostic for much longer, but I think that approaching each one like its own thing and tailoring the solution is the way to go, especially because, you want buy-in on the part of the client. And part of that is like, do they understand me? Are they plugging me into their ecosystem where it's like, hey, we're going to do this, rinse and repeat. We do it with everybody. And like, that doesn't instill a lot of confidence if I'm a business owner, right?
Yeah, I've said that I kind of have this is like a broad overstatement, but it's what I say is the way that you do market research and the way that you understand your ideal customer profiles, you have 1,000 conversations. Now, everyone goes 1,000 conversations, and I go, it's just a saying. Like it doesn't have to be 1,000; it could be 30. I would say as a starting point, if I was founding a company or going to market on an ICP, I'd want to talk with at least 25. And we in our free community, we do something called the mom test, which is not my idea, but it's a way of surveying people without biasing them. But I have found like that the trend in marketing is how much can we automate this? How much can we put a system in place? How can we clean the data faster? And I think that the honest truth of it is it actually is missing the point. And I think you make a really good point about like getting back to old school sales. what works best for me is old school sales. Like at this very moment, yes, you can
Yeah.
drive meetings. Yes, you can like, do some lead gen and do your typical paid ads across Meta and LinkedIn, etc. But at the end of the day, like once you drive them into the sales channel, it's old school sales. You're jumping on a call, you're making a pitch, you're putting forth a proposal, and you're following up with them, and you're qualifying them. And honestly, like I think some of my best leads don't come through the outbound channel. It's usually like me on LinkedIn, and I see a guy, and oh, that guy just mentioned that, and I send him a message. I would say what gives me a leg up in the old school outbound side is that I've worked pretty heavily on my personal brand, and so when people do like look at my profile, they're like, okay, this guy's like, he actually like thinks about this stuff a lot, and so that gives me kind of like a quick win with them. But beyond that, it's like, you know, can I pitch well?
Yeah.
Do I have a good value prop? Do I have a good offer? Do I understand my ICP? So,
I mean, so that I'm thinking through, like, there's like a few things rolling through my head. Like one is like one of my mentors in marketing, like he's got a bigger agency and he's here in Orange County as well. He's talking about like a lot of like marketing and BD for early stage company is like lead gen or customer acquisition is product validation, right? You get like, and you did it with ReviOps. Like we talk about it. It's like, give me like, I'm your ICP for that. You get me on a call, you ask me questions. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll sign up. It's like, that's what it is. Like I built this thing. I think it works for people like you. Poke holes in it. Tell me what you think. You win or you win, right? Like you either get great feedback and you change and you iterate, or they're like, oh, that's cool. I want that. And so like, that's one thing. The other thing too, and it's so funny, like I get self-conscious about this stuff because I'll hear like, I'm in a business group here in Orange County. Like it's part of EO, like the Entrepreneurs Organization, with their accelerator program. And I'll go into these rooms and I'll hear people and like, they're like in home services and stuff. And they're talking about all the stuff they're doing with AI. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be the guy that knows how automations and AI works. Cause it's like marketing's the forefront of this. I'm like, dang, this is wild. And it's always like, yeah, automate. If you like, I'm like, man, if there was ever a time where people are craving like real human interaction. And so like a lot of times we're not doing AI written copy almost ever. One, because again, like if you haven't, someone said something recently, like AI scales it doesn't fix it. And so like, like you can't like have AI create a validated offer for you, and other thing too is like, so we're engineering a lot of our messaging to sound like a real person. Cause right now it's like one of those things where like, have you never noticed kind of everybody sounds like ChatGPT these days? And so one is like creating real human interaction, because I think that wins. Like no one wants to like, and also the funny thing too is like, I notice people like almost like stick their head in the sand a little bit. Like they don't want to admit they got caught by an automation or AI. And so like I used to run with this one where I would like be talking to people and I would go, does this really work? And I'm like, well, yeah, because I used it on you and you're here and we're talking. And like people hate that. They're like, they don't like, they're like, I'm like, they're like, yeah, it'll work. Trust me, we'll do it for you. Like, and I don't even mention like we did the same thing in this conversation, and then also because it's like, and again, I think you probably automated your outreach to me, but then we got on conversation. I'm like, well, I know Ben, like we're like, he's a great guy. Like, and it felt human. And so, our focus on AI and automation is like almost everything leading up to the touch. And then from the touch on, I think human interaction wins.
exactly.
And, and again, I think ChatGPT is creating a generation of mentally weak entrepreneurs where we're letting AI do the thinking for us. Like I'm all for efficiencies. Like I'm the guy that had a Zapier account 5 years ago for my personal stuff, like I love that. I love it. But like as a business owner, like you have to, if you cannot cast your strategic vision, if you cannot think critically, if you cannot do creative problem solving, like you have no business being in the sport of business. And now people are wanting to outsource the creative thinking and the problem solving to ChatGPT. And it's like, it's not going to work. You know what I mean? Like, cause one, everyone else is doing it. So like what better way to blend in than just do what ChatGPT is telling everyone else to do. And then, again, like people don't want to engage with AIs and they don't want to engage with bots and they want to engage with people. So I'm all for automation. We do we we're using clay, sequence, all this stuff. We're doing all the things. But we want to engineer real connection because particularly the other thing too is like going back to the LinkedIn thing, because like I said, we're doing a lot of that lately, particularly because a lot of our clients have like what I call like negative perception businesses. Like they're in finance, right? Like you got to talk to the marketing guy. You have an exciting problem, right? Like, oh, it's because we're ready for growth because we've got money to spend and we're going to scale. You got to talk to the finance guy. Like something's broken, right? And so like outreach from them is like, no, I don't want to talk to you. Either I don't think I have problems I don't know about, or I don't want to admit I have problems. And so, again, where you can have a conversation with a real human being, understand the things, frame in like, no, we're not just bean counters. We don't just fix financial problems. We actually help people set up strategic finance so that you can scale and grow. It's like, oh, that's a different thing. But again, you can't get an AI agent to do that for you. And again, maybe I'm sticking my head in the sand. Maybe 6 months from now, no one will know the difference and no one will care. But it's like, I do think like, particularly on the creative thinking side of things, like you can't outsource your thinking to an AI. It's going to cripple you, I think, in terms of being able to stay ahead of things in business and create future value. Cause again, we're not like an EOS company, but you think of like the rocket fuel, like visionary integrator thing. Like I think the CEO's role when you grow past like the early stages is to create future value for the customers and employees. And you can't create future value if you are not thinking about things critically. So I like sitting in these rooms. I hear people talk about AI and how they're like, creating a virtual board of, I'm sure like all this stuff is cool. Like it's great. I can get all kinds of stuff and I use it. I do all these things. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm not saying I don't do them, but I'm saying like you have to draw a line in the sand of like, where are you going to say like, no, this stays with me. I'm going to think about these things because I'm the one casting the vision for my team. I'm the one creating future value for my clients and my employees, and not just outsourcing your thinking to an AI.
So it's, I saw something on LinkedIn the other day that I thought was a really nice contrarian take, because I think the zeitgeist and the like entire world is believing that AI is going to come and just rule us all. And this guy said like, GPTs have a real problem. They are starting to now rely entirely on fabricated, basically bullshit data. And the problem with that is that it is then creating a negative feedback loop where the more it gets created, the more the distortion of the actual output occurs, meaning that it's bad. It's not real. It's not accurate. It's not insightful. And now I don't know the edges of how true this is or is not true, but I'm just kind of like, restating it here. And I think that like this does resonate with me though, because I was in AI before AI was cool, like in 2015, 2016.
I thought you could say like a year ago.
No, yeah. We had a computer vision based technology for satellite imagery analysis in the oil field. So what we would do is we would take these pictures of the ground, and this is before Planet was cool. Like Planet is a company that sells satellite imagery, or Airbus or any of the other ones. But we would take the imagery and we literally got like a bunch of basically like oil field GIS students to go, and we built an app to literally just take the imagery, put it in front of them, and they had to like draw squares around the objects that were oil pads. We were trying to do oil pad detection. And what we wanted to do was to know when the frac fleets would show up. So what we would do is we actually bought a bunch of cell phone data, and we would take these little boxes that we would detect in the oil field, middle of the desert, and we would then overlay it with cell phone data to then see when those cell phone pings would show up in that spot. And then we would look, because there's different like bands of satellite photos. So you can have like infrared and a bunch of different stuff. So you can look for metal, plus you can look for cell phone signals, and we could then assume that the frac fleet was showing. Now, the reason that was interesting was because in the oil field, the supply chain drives the entire business. And so everybody wants to know when the frac fleet's there, because it tells them where the industry's going, where the drilling events are going to be happening, who can sell to these people when they're out in the field. And so you'd see this big burst of activity in a very specific spot. So I'm saying that backstory to say that like we got very used to understanding the edges of what AI was capable of and what it wasn't capable of. And the key thing was you had to have good data. Now, I think people know that is like people talk about like, oh, this model was trained on this petabytes of data, like whatever the heck it is. But it's a lot of data. And
Yeah.
if you have missing data or a lack of context to data, all of a sudden the model can't perform, even though it's like a superpower. So for us, like for example, in the oil field, like there's just fundamentally a lack of data around what's happening out there, and it's not online. And I think that like from my experience, having built a bunch of these SaaS applications from scratch and going out and talking to people, and I used to go out and literally ride with people in their trucks, and I would write down these big memos of like Bob would open up his phone and he would do this weird thing at this, and I would see those weird like kind of tendencies that nobody would ever notice unless you were anthropologically like looking at somebody's behavior. And GPTs don't have access to those like small subtle things.
Yeah.
So I think I'm like specifically talking about like software development or product development at this moment. But it's like there's no way a GPT can compete against me who has two eyeballs and all my clear understanding of how these people think and act and work. So I can say, okay, you actually need this very specific feature and cut out all the noise. So I agree with you. I mean, I think from a vision perspective, a strategy perspective, a product development perspective, there's so many subtle clues that kind of come together that a GPT would never have access to. Now, I would say the counter to that is if they start getting drones and shit, like, and they like can start listening to
Yeah.
people's like conversations at all times, like of all cell phones, all of a sudden were like completely hacked and you could listen to every single conversation. And there was like the dash cams were watching your face and seeing your tendencies, we'd be in trouble. But I think that at this very moment, there's just a lack of data capturing infrastructure to enable GPTs to be as insightful as humans. Not because they're not smart enough, it's because they don't have access to the information and the context.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. And like you said, it's what it seems like the system's feeding itself, right? Like it's creating what I think is a little bit of a negative feedback loop in some
Mhm.
ways or whatever. I mean, how many times do you use AI for content generation?
Yeah,
Yeah, right. Like how many times have you typed in a prompt like for give me a LinkedIn post?
right. Of course, that's
And
like
you're
the
just like,
number one thing I
I'm just
do.
I'm just gonna post I like half the time I'm just gonna post this. Like I put as much thought into the prompt as I would have just writing a LinkedIn post. It's like, oh, and now my LinkedIn post actually sounds like me instead of like everyone else using ChatGPT. So yeah, like you said, I think you don't want to. Again, I'm not an AI expert. Obviously, this is the world we're living in, and our industry, right, is that kind of at the forefront of the effects of it. But like my goal is not to live in a less human world. You know,
Hmm.
like I'm not. My goal is not to like automate everything to the point where I don't have to talk to people. Um,
Hmm.
Even if I was maybe more efficient or more productive or richer, like I don't really care what kind of life is that. So, anyways,
This gets back to the experience because I just came back from like a Costa Rican kind of retreat, call it a spiritual retreat, kind of cliche, go into the jungle and like kumbaya with a bunch of people and meditate, and so I just did that. But I remember like when just to paint a picture for everyone, I flew into San Jose and we took a kind of an 8-person seat of plane across the mountain range, very lush rainforest, kind of hilly. And then you arrive near the beach in a small little kind of jungle runway. And then you take the SUVs 20 minutes down the road and then go straight up a mountain and end up in like straight out of a storybook with toucans and howler monkeys and tarantulas and like rainforest. I mean, it's raining every day heavily, and there's these winding kind of roads, not roads, like little paths that aren't even lit, and there's roots coming across the paths, and there's these kind of geometrical domes, like glamping style domes, and there's a central place where everybody meets and eats together, like a Harry Potter style open, like there's no walls, open to the rainforest. We eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like gourmet food. It was awesome. And then down the trail, there was this yoga studio, and it was kind of up on pillars, and you would just go and we would do meditation and breath work and yoga and a bunch of fun stuff there. But the thing I took away from all of that was, when I was sitting there without technology, just hearing the jungle, it was just like so peaceful. And I just really enjoyed just connecting with human beings. And this brings me back to a time, like, I don't know, this is like 15 years ago. I remember being at a club. It was like late at night, and it was like 1 a.m. And I saw these, they were probably both like 21. I was probably the same age, 21, 20, 21. And they're sitting there and they're kind of just dancing to the whatever music was on, and kind of near each other, but not together, not like looking at each other, but kind of near each other. And it was the first time like I really like got this very visceral impression that human beings are just so in need of human connection. We're so in need of being around each other. Even if we're like, don't want to admit it. And even if we aren't aware of it. And I certainly wasn't aware of it. I thought like, I don't need you people, like I'll just go sit in a log cabin. But there's a reason you watch those, like those documentary style like shows where they go out into the woods and they're alone and they have to survive for 3 months. There's so many guys that I see on those shows where they're just like, I'm lonely and I don't want to be here anymore. And they actually quit, not because they're hungry or they're in trouble or there's a bear coming after them. It's because they miss their kids and they're questioning life. And so coming back to the jungle, it was just really refreshing. And I was like, man, I would actually like really find value in just even putting on more of these retreats. One of the things I have a goal of for NextGen Sales Systems with the pro community that I just launched yesterday, we have 10 people in it right now, 1,200 people in the free community, but 10 on the pro, you being one of them, is I want to start doing more like retreats. Like I want to like, and not just to talk about business, just to go do stuff, just to like have fun, just talk about like life. And I will say that for me personally, as an entrepreneur, I've lived a very isolated, kind of lonely life, especially after COVID. I haven't been in an office for, I don't know, as long as COVID's been going, probably a year before that. So I show up on Zoom calls, I do podcasts, I see my wife, I go to the gym, but it's basically like no real human interaction other than, oh, how are you? So I 100% agree, man. Like I think that the world's become too automated, too digitized, too fabricated, too marketing oriented. And here I am with NextGen Sales Leaders, and it's like, I want to make it as human as possible. And it's a real paradox. I live in these two worlds, but it's frustrating, I would say.
Yeah.
That's all for this podcast episode. We actually had technical difficulties, unfortunately, and we lost the second half of the podcast episode, which stinks. You can go find Tyler at amplis.co, also Tyler Mounce on LinkedIn. So go check out Tyler. He's an awesome guy, and you should definitely be following him if you want to learn about anything about Clay, marketing, outbound, GTM in general. Thanks for being on the show, Tyler. Sorry that the rest of the episode got cut off. See you guys on the next one.